Hello and welcome. I'm Rosemary Pena, President of the Black German Heritage and Research Association. Our conversation today is the fourth in our Spring 2024 event series in collaboration with our students at Davidson College. My colleague, Dr. Emily Fraser-Rath, our students and I are both honored and delighted to welcome today's special guest, Mr. Mekonnen Meshghena. But before we get started, I'll ask Emily if she would be so kind as to share a little about our work together before introducing Mr. Meshghena and our students. Emily?
Thank you, Rosemary. My name is Emily Fraser-Rath, and I'm Executive Director of Education Initiatives for the BGHRA. Thank you all very much for being here for our final conversation of the academic year. I'm also visiting assistant professor of German Studies at Davidson College, where I co-teach our course entitled Race, Gender, Migration with Dr. Pena. Today is April 23rd, 2024, and we, Dr. Pena, me, and most importantly, our students are in our final week together in our German 241 class entitled Race, Gender, Migration. The class is conceived of in three parts. It is first a survey course in the field of Black German and European cultural studies. Second, it is a community-based learning course as we support the BGHRA through our work, and will feature our final projects on the BGHRA archive. And it is more importantly an opportunity for students, and through these recordings, our broader BGHRA and Davidson communities to speak with people whose lives and work are at the intersections of artistic expression, resistance and activism, migration and identity, among many other things in modern-day Europe. For today's conversation, I would like to thank the Center for Civic Engagement at Davidson College and its director, Dr. Stacy Reamer. So before turning things over to our students, I'd like to introduce our guest today, Mekonnen Meshghena. Mekonnen is a policy analyst, well-respected journalist, and head of the Migration and Diversity Department at the Heinrich Böll Stiftung, a think tank affiliated with the German political party Die Grünen, or the Green Party. In preparation for our conversation today, students have read the interview transcript from a conversation Mekonnen had with Bastian Herrnissen on Trump's election and structural racism from 2016. His article entitled Cities of Migration: An Agenda for Shared Prosperity from 2014, and the Heinrich Böll Stiftung's e-paper entitled Germany, Land of Immigration Report from the Commission, Perspectives for a Forward-Looking and Sustainable Refugee and Immigration Policy. So we have lots to talk about, and we're very, very grateful for you joining us today and for sharing your time and expertise with us. And so with that, I'll turn things over to you and to our students.
Thank you so much, Emily, for the kind invitation and introduction. Thank you, Rosemary. I'm very glad to be here with you. Can you hear me well? Is that okay with the voice? Great. So I'm right now in Berlin. I don't know if everyone is at one spot or different places, but I'm very glad to get in discussion with you about different perspectives, transatlantic perspectives, and I think we have common issues these days, a lot of common issues. So since Emily already informed me that you have already had a lot of conversation about German politics, about what we do, I tried for today to go another angle and discuss with you about what's going on in general, how we are threatened in our democracies, how extremism and right-wing terrorism is expanding and also forcing people to leave their home. So it's a lot about forced migration on the one side, but also from the receiving perspective about the situations of our democracies, of the societies. So those people who seek for refuge need also safe arrivals, and these arrivals are quite vulnerable these days. I would say we have an eroding systems in our democracies. So that's what I would like to start with, and then go through a recent study, research we did, a diversity study on political powers in parliaments. Since we are a political institution, a political foundation, we very much look into how structures are designed in political parties, in city parliaments, in federal parliaments. So we look into how do participation work in a migrant society, in a diverse society, and how is power shared among different groups in the society. So the Heinrich Böll Foundation, Emily already introduced briefly. The Heinrich Böll Foundation is a think tank affiliated with the German Green Party. So I think this is a very unique organizational structure we have in Germany, which not, I think, very common. There are some think tanks in the US which are also affiliated with the Democratic Party, with the Republicans. However, this is a different style, since we have here many political parties, and each party has a think tank with some affiliation. However, it is an affiliation. It's more a political affiliation, and there is no any direct cooperation. So we receive public funding from the German parliament, depending on how the political parties are represented in the federal parliament, but also in the state parliaments. So it's a very complicated math. So depending on the degree of representation and how they have been in the last 5 years. So it's not only on the present, but also depending on how the political parties have been performing the last 5 years, because otherwise you will have so many parties which come and go, so there will be no stability. But for that purpose, if a political party is established in the last 5 years, has been continuously in a parliament, then it could apply for funding and have a start on its own structures, how political think tank can be constructed. So it's a very complicated structure on how this funding has been distributed among the political parties, but we have 5 established political parties in Germany since the last, I would say, 40, 50 years. And all these political parties have think tanks which has an affiliation to their political idea and political projects. So there is no direct cooperation between a political think tank and a political party. So otherwise, we'll lose the funding, we'll not get any funding, because that would be funding a political party. So it's not allowed to fund a political party, but you can fund a think tank which has an affiliation and no direct cooperation. So we are not allowed to do any campaign for the Green Party, but it's our job actually to promote the idea of the Green Party, depending on environmental issues, on climate issues, on gender issues, on issues around diversity, on issues around education, on issues around economy, global cooperation. So there's a bunch of issues which we share, visions we share, but we have also differences, and we talk a lot about those differences as well. So since we are not those who are campaigning for the party, and we have also the privilege not to be elected or diselected. So we have some sort of privilege to think and share our ideas. and the politicians have to implement it at the end of the day. Having said that, there is no limitation in our work when we cooperate with other political decision makers. It could be also from the Social Democrats. We also cooperate with Christian Democrats, which is the Conservative Party, and to some extent also the leftist groups. So there is no limitation for us, and if they don't mind, we are very open to cooperate with other political parties, with other political foundations. Our limitation is we only cooperate with democratic institutions, with democratic parties and democratic think tanks, but not with extremists. So right-wing extremism is a taboo for us. We will not be cooperating with them in any way. So maybe I can make a brief pause at this point before I start with my presentation. Do you have any questions in regard to the think tank, to the Heinrich Böll Foundation? So then let me start. I will share my display here, and let me know if it works. Can you see?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, great. So, I mean, these days, as you can see in a lot of global discussion, we are, let's say, not only here in Germany, but also, I think, everywhere, the liberal democracy is much under pressure. So that's why I think when we talk about immigration, when we talk about our societies, when we talk about equal opportunities, it's very important also to look what's going on actually. Who are the people coming to us? What kind of political systems are they fleeing? How are the conflicts in other regions? So in many societies these days, people are struggling actually more for democracies. So if you look in the map, we can see the green is more or less societies where there is more freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of election. You can vote, you can be elected, you can be a candidate. You have more liberal democracies, not full democracies, but you have more liberal democracies, while then you have some countries which are partly free, but then I would say, I'm afraid to say that, the majority not free or more autocratic systems. And if you go deeper, look into how democracies are designed, and when we look into the different types of democracy, we have only 8% of the world's population which live in a full-fledged democracy. So it's a long variety of systems here, but I think you can see here the picture where we have big gap in lifestyle and also access to liberal freedom and democracies. So it's in numbers, if you look into numbers, we have only 24 countries in the world which have full democracy, while 59 countries are authoritarian regimes with no freedom. So, and then you have hybrid regimes, and then you have flawed democracies, which is also a big number. But as you can see, it's only 14.4% of the countries in the world, and all around 8% of the population in the world who are enjoying actually full democracy. So You can see here, even among the countries, how they rate, and high-income countries and middle-income countries, but how the scores on democracy vary from place to place. So is the person who say ruled by a strong leader or the military would be a good way of governing the country. So he is a support for authoritarianism. And if you see in many of those democratic systems in the US, 32% of the people favor authoritarian system. In Canada, 27%. In UK, 37%. Poland, 29%. So you can go through all the countries. India and Indonesia ranking very, very high, 85% and 77%. But also in Kenya, South Africa, and in Nigeria, in Mexico. So even in those democratic regimes or democratic systems, you have a big number of people who are seeking more for a strong hand or a strong person to take the lead. So the last 17 years, it shows how the democratic process has been going in the last 17 years, in which countries we see improvement and which other countries see more declination. I mean, it's in general, it's also very dynamic. So it's not like when you see the last couple of years in Poland, now we have a democratic system. So it's not always like a linear development, but we have a fluent development, which is very dynamic. Like the Netherlands have been for quite a long time a liberal democracy, but then suddenly the last election, things have been turned upside down. Like in Italy, we have a neo-fascist government. And in Poland, we had for quite a long time an authoritarian system, but then suddenly the people also shifted to more democratic systems. So this is the decline in freedom, which has been observed in every region of the world. So you can see here how democracies and liberal systems has been flipped in different regions. In the US, at the end of the graphic, if you can see, it's minus 10%. So it's not only that we have all these democratic issues in the global south, but it is a global issue these days. And we have here in colors 29% of the world population could be considered not free at all, 28% partly free, but it's only 43%. This is the full democracy plus those democratic systems in general. Added together, we have 43% of those people who enjoy actually freedom. So, and here you have the last statistics, worst of the worst. And if you look into those countries, and these are also these days one of those major refugee producing countries. So Syria, Eritrea, and Central Africa, Afghanistan, Somalia, Azerbaijan, Yemen. These are the countries where most of the refugees are coming, mostly to Europe. But at the beginning, the neighboring countries, and if cannot sustain in those neighboring countries, they flee even much more far west, and some of them even across the Atlantic to South America or to Middle America, and then to the US. So you see the correlation between the political systems. Now comes also the climate change as a further issue for forced migration. So there is a direct connection between political systems, the climate change, and immigration or the situation of refugees. So having said that, Germany is among Europe one of those major receiving countries, and I think the last 10 to 15 years, I think even globally, Germany is one of those major immigration countries. Within Europe, it's the biggest receiving country, but then even globally, most probably after the US, Canada, maybe Australia, maybe Germany, which is one of those receiving countries as an immigration country. But I also want to underline that most of the refugees, when they flee their home country, they go to the neighboring countries. So that's the first destination when people are under pressure, when there is conflict, when there is war, people actually go to the neighboring country. That's in every region. So once they cannot sustain there, once they cannot survive for a longer time, if the conflicts in their home countries are not solved, if there is no solution for a longer perspective, then they may continue to flee. That was exactly the situation 2015 of the Syrian refugee movement, 2015, 2016, around 1 million people from Syria arrived in Germany, for example. And all these refugees has been in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Turkey. So that was their first destination because these are the neighboring countries. So it's always the aspiration of refugees to go back to home. So as soon as possible, actually, that's the aspiration. If the conflicts are prolonged, if there is no perspective for ending the conflict, then they flee. So they continue actually to flee. That was the situation of 2015, 2016. So as a consequence of that, many came to Germany, and Germany at that time, which is not usual, but for that period, Germany was extremely generous, opened its doors and received every refugee at that period. And most of the other European countries opened their doors and said, please continue your journey to Germany. As long as you don't stay here, we can pass over. So that was the situation. And as Germany started to lit the number of refugees, then there was a lot of misunderstanding, at least among the member states, because most of the European countries were not amazed by the way how Germany was dealing with that number of refugees at that time. And then when Germany asked for burden sharing to share the burden of immigration and refugees, then we had a huge controversial debate. So we have still those controversial debates while we are still tackling the issue of receiving refugees, dealing in the external borders, which are Mediterranean Sea. On the eastern part is Turkey and Greece. The southern is more Italy, Malta, Spain, and in the southern part of Mediterranean Sea is Libya, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt. So there is a lot of negotiation how to tackle these issues, how to actually decline refugees. So when they talk all the time about protecting the external borders, it means declining actually refugees. But since the pressure in their home countries are extremely high, people will always try to cross the borders, and that's what's happening in the Mediterranean Sea, but also in the regions between Turkey and Greece. People die actually every day because the pressure in the home countries is much bigger than the hurdles or the the external borders, how external borders are designed and also protected. So whatever is going on the external borders, it's not deterrent for refugees, because refugees are still trying to find a more surviving atmosphere, and would do anything to survive all those difficulties. So once they are in Europe, then they also try to reunify with their families and bring their families. So you have here also a gender issue, that most of those who try to cross borders are male, and once they are able to settle in Europe, then they try to bring their families if they have, for example, children and wives. So it is a big issue how we also manage migration in a more diverse way. How are able to access women with children, all the border hardships, because how they are designed right now is extremely very hard for people who are vulnerable, who are old, who are sick, and for children to go through the European external borders. So this is the situation right now. And then immigration is highly politicized on the other side. If you see the conflict we have in the Eastern Europe and the West and the NATO, for example, in Ukraine, in Belarus, and Russia. Belarus has been also instrumentalizing immigration by inviting, for example, immigrants from various countries, from Afghanistan, from Syria, to come to Belarus, so they can cross through Belarus to the EU, which is the Polish border, and the Polish external border force has been pushing back, and people have been pushed back from both sides, from Belarus to Poland, from Poland to Belarus, and some of those people have been staying in this border area for almost 2 years. 2 years in no man's land, and under very harsh conditions, and also many die in those situations. So it's highly politicized, highly instrumentalized condition. So this is a situation when it comes to the situation of democracies under pressure, authoritarian systems, and climate change, and forcing people to leave their homes, but not finding easy refuge in the West, in Europe. But I would also like to highlight on how the German society these days is constituted, how power has been also the division of power among the diverse society. So pluralism is a fact, a reality in Germany. So the German society is an extreme diverse society. However, we know how the structures are designed, we know how power is shared among certain group of people. So I would like to highlight our recent study on political representation in cities' parliaments. So we focused exclusively on cities, how cities' parliaments are constituted. And I think this is our fifth or sixth study. So the last studies has been also quite popular, even in the US, in Canada, in many other European countries, because the pattern of power sharing is always the same. The pattern how power has been distributed among certain privileged groups is very, very similar. So it's a study about German cities, but I think the structures in many other countries, especially in the West, is quite similar. So I would like just to give you a brief insight of those results, and then we can discuss from there on how how that could be applied to the US situation in how power has been distributed in the US society and system. So it is a metropolitan study, and the study took place in 2022 and 2023. So we have 3 results from the study. One is specifically on gender, on female, so women are represented in parliaments, because our parliaments in cities are not just an appendix. Cities parliaments are very strong in the federal system. So Germany is a federal republic, which means we have the state level, we have the communal or the municipality level on the cities, and then we have the states. We have in Germany 16 states with own governments, very similar to the US, but a lot more autonomy, I think. But then we have the federal government. So we have different layers of parliaments and different layers of power. And each layer has a strong autonomous power. So we, one part of our study was specifically on women. The second was more on violence towards politicians. And the third one was the degree or the level of representation based on gender, based on class, based on race, and also based on disability, and also on sexual orientation and so on. So I'll show you the results. So we have been trying to look into the various areas of political participation, but also pressure, which is put these days on people who are politically active. So in a nutshell, you can see here, local officials and elected representatives are generally male, heterosexual, academic, without a migrant background, over 50, Christian or non-denominational, without physical disabilities or mental health issues. So this is in a nutshell. This is briefly put into one sentence. So I'll try to translate, because the numbers are here in German. So here is representation in federal, state, and so as you see here, the red, I don't know, depending on how we can see it, red or pink, that's the gender, and then you have blue, which is a very minority number, it's non-binary, and the rest is male. So Bundestag means the federal parliament, Landtag is the state parliament, and Großstädte means the metropolitan cities. So if you see the degree of representation of women in the federal parliament, 35% women. In the population in Germany, we have, I think, 52% female. In the German federal parliament, we have 35%. In the state level, in the 16 states, this is an average of the 16 German states, 33 are female, and in the cities, 39%. So city, the degree of representation in cities is better than in the parliaments on the state level and on the federal level. And this is on academic. So this is a class issue. So who is actually represented in our parliaments? So how's the distribution of education? And education is always an indication for class as well. And when we look into the pictures, yellow is a university degree, either a college or university degree. So if you see in all levels, our parliaments are highly academic. So this is also one of those issues, how other social classes are underrepresented on all levels of parliament. This is based on migrant background. In the federal parliament, we have only 11% of our elected parliamentarians have an immigrant background. In the total population, German's total population is around 1/3, 30%. It's around 30% of the people in Germany have either parents who immigrated to Germany, or they immigrated to Germany, or are not German citizens, but 30% have in the one or the other way an immigrant background. That's the term we use here. Not all of them have the German citizenship. With the German citizenship, it's around 20%, so 10% are citizens with European, with EU citizenship, for example, or Turkish, whatever, any other citizenship. So in the state level, 7%, which is even less, and in the cities, 13%. So you see here how the level of participation in parliaments looks like. So this shows only the population with a migrant background by nationalities. So the green one are German citizens with an immigrant background. And then the yellow one is EU citizens in Germany. That's according to the EU policies. EU citizens can at least vote and be elected on the city parliaments, not on the state parliaments, not in the federal parliaments, but in the city parliaments or in the municipality level. EU citizens can vote, so they can be elected. That's why it's so relevant also to mention EU citizenship. And the red numbers are neither German nor EU citizens. So that's the degree of representation in Germany. And the first picture is based far left, that is the big cities, and then Berlin as a comparison, and then West German states and East German states. So you can see also how the different states in East and West, so which means West German and East German means former Federal Republic of Germany and the former Democratic Republic of Germany, GDR. So this is the difference. And in Eastern Germany, we have less migrant population than in the West. This depends on the tradition. So this is representation by in and by parties. So if you look, one is academic in different parties, academic, women, migrant background, and to some extent with an immigrant background, which means as we did the survey, we left it to the people's choice, to the participants' choice, how they define themselves. So there were, for example, people who are not white, but they wouldn't say they have an immigrant background or they're immigrants. So, for example, Black Germans, they may be also Asian Germans, whatever. So they have also a number of participants, and all these participants are representatives. Okay, we are talking about politicians. We are elected representatives. So this is a number about representatives. So we have here the various groups depending on how the people would categorize themselves. So with an academic background, if you look into the different political parties, Die Linke is a leftist party, SPD is a social democratic party, then Grüne is a green, FDP is a Free Democratic Party, a liberal party. CDU is the Christian Democratic Union, then Christian Social Union. CDU and CSU are parties which are very close and also interconnected. AfD is a far-right wing. That's one of our major troublemaker these days in German democracies. And then Freie Wähler is also another right-wing party. So there is one pattern, as you can see, in every party. The number of academic and higher education is overrepresented, and all the others are underrepresented. So especially in the Green Party, as you can see, 80% of those elected representatives in the Green Party have an academic background or have a university degree. So it shows how elitist these parties are, and especially the Green Party, as you can see here. Then at the same time, if you see the number of female, 51% of the Green Party representatives or elected members are female. 18% have an immigrant background, which is the highest in comparison to the other parties. This is extremely low when you look into the overall demographic of the country, but if you compare with the other political parties, still it's the highest. And then 12%, these are non-white politicians, who would define themselves in a various way. So you have here a more picture here. So when you look into the race, class, gender, and the other representation, maybe you can have a look at age, by faith, disability, sexual orientation. So most of those representatives are actually quite old. Average age is 51. Christian is the most dominating faith among those representatives. Disability, only 14% of those public officials and representatives have physical disability or mental illness. Around 5% have a disability that has been confirmed by an official notice, which is actually with some kind of identity card. And sexual orientation, only 9.4% of officials and elected officials state that they are homosexual, bisexual, or queer. So religious affiliation, I told you that the majority are Christian, but if you look into the different affiliations, evangelisch means Protestant, Catholic, Muslim, then Jewish, and others. Sexual orientation, just to give you a complete picture of that. Heterosexual, around 81%, and LGBTQI, around 9.4%, and then others wouldn't mention their sexuality. By age, you can see here the pyramids, how the age has been distributed in the parliaments. So picture disability. So 86% without any disability or health issues. 12% have some sort of disability, and 2% have strong disability. So we present the study at a conference. Who is speaking for who? That was, and most of these are either researchers or participants of the survey. So you can find most of our papers, our study, in our website, Heimatkunde. So we have a lot of dossiers, studies, articles, and analysis, which gives you some ideas on how the German, but the European political systems on the one side has been developing the last couple of years, how the issue of refugees has been tackled, but also how our democracies are constituted these days. So how representation is working, or where do we see gap between the reality, between the demographic and the real representation on all levels of politics. As I mentioned already, but you also read a lot. Emily told me that you have read a lot on right-wing movements, on extremism. And that is one of our major topic as well, because we had a series of attacks on immigrants, on refugees, on Jewish population. So it's not a single issue, but we have very strong networks, very strong political representation, but also organizations with strategies, with knowledge, and also with affiliation to international networks who do serious damage and attack on civilians. We look into the diverse groups in the society. We tackle also different modes of representation, but also about the issue of visibility, the issue of history. This has been one of our most successful dossiers, studies we did on Black in Germany. That's the title of the publication, and goes like centuries back to the 19th century, to the 18th century, 17th century history of Black people in Germany as part of the German society. So we look very deep into those. We look into colonialism. We look into their representation these days, into the struggle of Black people, and how they also have their share in designing the German society these days. So another issue is looking into how politics and pop culture has been also intertwined, how the representation of young people in political movements and social movements, how music, how sports, how various fields has been also shaping the political sphere. So the notion and the way how people participate in politics is also changing. It's not only the social media, but also how culture and how literature are also designing politics. That's part of our work we do. Of course, we look into international politics. So Black Lives Matter has been also one of our major issues before 3 years. So we did a lot of publications, analysis, conferences. We have been tackling that issue since our lives are interconnected in many ways. The war in the Ukraine has been a major issue in Europe and remains one of those issues, not only in politics, but also within society, because around 1.3 million Ukrainians came to Germany, and Germany has been trying to also deal with that issue in a very also unique and progressive way. So Ukrainians had freedom of mobility, access to everything, which is, I would say, very unique situation, which has been also very encouraging for the refugee policy. However, it ended there. So it was only especially for Ukrainian refugees. It has been a new trend to make it much easier for refugees to arrive, to participate, to go everywhere they would like, to access the welfare system, to access all services of the government. But it remained limited for Ukrainians. That's the other discouraging moment of that. And last but not least, the conflict in Israel and in Palestine, in Gaza. As you can imagine, that affects the German politics and society immediately, since Germany is historically obliged also to side with Israel, to be always on the Israeli side. But the German society is extremely diverse. So we have a very diverse situation here. The biggest Palestinian community in Europe resides in Germany, but then you have also a big number of Jewish community in Germany. You have a big number of Israelis who came the last years to Germany. So it's extremely diverse. All these people live peacefully together, but this conflict has been also very divisive, not only because the communities are in trouble, but also the German society has also been not dealing with that issues, including my organization. We were not wise in dealing with issues, in looking into the suffering of all people at the same time, without being more partially on that level. So this issue is still current, it's going on, and is still very divisive, and we are trying to tackle and heal many wounds. We have also publications on that. This is part of our publication I'm highlighting here. So we published so far at least 20 perspectives of Jewish writers, of Palestinian writers, German writers. So we try to look into those perspectives and bridge the gap as far as we can. So thank you so much for your attention, and I'm very glad and open to hear your questions, your feedback, your opinion, whatever.
Hello. My question is, like, you work for a think tank and it's like politically affiliated. Did your political, like what you connect with come before working for the think tank, or like after you started working at the think tank?
I think it was before. I studied journalism, and I have been working as a journalist, and I've been working a lot on international journalism. So I was dealing, for example, with issues around disinformation, how disinformation works, how politics is mostly designed, disinformation by design. I mean, when I talk about disinformation, I mean, it's really by design, how states, governments disinform, disseminate disinformation to do politics. So that were some of my issues. So I was quite dealing a lot on that issue before I came to the foundation. Yeah.
Why do you think that the European countries, oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Why do you think that the European countries with more struggling economies have higher rates of supporting authoritarianism? Is that kind of just a result of scapegoating and like anti-immigration sentiment as a reason for economic, crisis or stagnation, or do you think it stems from somewhere else?
Mhm. This is a very good question. Yes and no. It's when we look so maybe let me start. Those countries who are transforming from an authoritarian system like a communist systems, most of those East European countries, which has been communist systems or socialist systems, different extent, have been struggling to adapt, for example, democratic governance. So this has been always an issue. How can you be a pluralistic society without having democratic institutions? So there was a lack of democratic institutions in most of those countries during the last decades. So the transformation is going in some societies and countries is fast, but in many countries has been quite slow. So there's a direct connection between a pluralistic policy and institutions. So lack of institutions has been one of those major issues in many of those countries. So and the economic situation may add up to that issue, but not necessarily. Not all countries who are struggling or have been struggling on the economic end has been autocratic or undemocratic. So, but then there is like a number of factors: undemocratic, authoritarian tradition, lack of institutions, economic deprivation. So if it adds up, it may also end up in scapegoating, in rejecting immigrants and so on. But to be very honest, if you look, for example, into the German situation, we have West Germany and East Germany. And within East Germany, not every, and there is a huge number of rejection in most of the East German states, for example, which has been formerly the communist system. But some of the states are quite well in their economic developments during the last years because the German government has been investing a lot in industries, in education, and so on. If you take the state of Sachsen, for example, where you have one of those strongholds of the right-wing movements, their economic situation is much better than many of those Western states, for example. So we have also states in West Germany which are struggling with economics, but more liberal in the way how they tackle the issue of refugees and receiving refugees and so on. Also, if you look into the demographics of the voters of right-wing groups, if you remember the picture, even the AfD, which is a right-wing or the right extremist party in the parliament, the majority of their voters are with university degrees, so with good jobs, so middle class actually, with good income. So we have been always also interpreting this way that we say lower class, working class, with struggling with their jobs and so on, blue collar votes for right-wing parties, and white collar and education with a higher education with university degrees vote more liberal or conservative. So this is not this is only partially true. Yes. So it's not only the economic issues, but it's also a lot of ideology. So there is some sort of seek for authoritarian leaders. This is very unfortunate, but that seems a trend these days. That's, by the way, very similar if you look into South American societies as well. In Argentina, it's quite similar. In Brazil, when you look into India, in Philippines, so even in the US, it's not only those who are deprived will be or have been voting for authoritarian politicians. So it's a very diverse demographic seeking for more authoritarian leadership. Maybe you can also give me some of your ideas on how you see the level of representation in the US, how much of that can be applied to the US demographics of your elected representatives on the different levels. I would be very much interested how much of that is similar to the realities of the US.
What do y'all think?
I think about like Nikki Haley and how like she's Indian, but like she like uses her race kind of like to present herself in like how she wants to in different situations. And like I don't know, that's been really interesting to see kind of like how she identifies in different situations.
Their thoughts?
Sorry, this leads me to like a follow-up question, I guess, just in response to your point about how people vote in the US, because we are a two-party system. So I think that leads me to believe that a lot more people vote for like one or two issue reasons, like potentially just who's going to tax them less, but and like, you know, for their economic interests as opposed to kind of like the social issues that get discussed a lot more heavily in the news and seem to be a lot more divisive. So that's why I guess I'm wondering, in your experience in European politics and in Germany particularly, do you think people vote more out of ideology than they might in the US because there is such a variety of options?
Yeah, I mean the options are shrinking, to be very honest, because you know, I mean, political parties tend also to look into trends. So that's the one thing. I mean, yes, I think ideology is one major driving force in that sense. On the other side, I wonder what is actually the ideology behind, let's say, the AfD, that's Alternative für Deutschland. This is this right extremist party in Germany we have so far. Unless they want to really destabilize and destroy our democracies, because they shift the agenda every time. So they started at the beginning by opposing the euro, the currency euro. So that was their issue. That's how they got popular, because there was some sentiments in the German society. They wanted to have their Deutschmark. The Deutschmark was the current, the older currency after the Second World War, which was very stable. So Deutschmark was like a trademark of German economy. but then the European Union, Germany is one of those driving forces within the European Union, and of course, Germany has to share the currency. You cannot be member of an economic region, member of an economic alliance, but then not share the currency. I mean, the UK did it. UK was also an active member of the EU, but as we know, they weren't part of the euro, and consequently, they also exited with the Brexit from the EU. So there were some sentiments, you know, in every society, you have always some degree of sentiment that people would like to have older currencies, older systems, whatever it is. So that was how the AfD was actually founded. That was a founding ideology of the AfD. They want their Deutschmark back. They didn't want euro, because euro is like, if there is any instability on the European level, of course, every country with euro is affected by this instability, so they have to tackle it. They need a common policy, they need a common strategies to tackle every instability within the European Union. So we have seen it with the Greek declining economy, how European countries were struggling. Actually, that Greek doesn't collapse. If a country collapses, it's a big damage for the euro and the European Union. So yes, there is some risk in that, but however, the shifting from Deutschmark to euro benefited Germany a lot, because Germany is exporting nation, and the Germans benefited en masse from that, and they know exactly. So the European economy knows exactly that the euro is essential for the German economy, but AfD doesn't care. AfD is just a party which would like to collect, you know, like all sentiments and bring people together. So that was the ideology. Then it didn't work. They shifted the ideology to fighting Muslim and Islam. So they went, you know, every Monday, they organized every Monday demonstrations against Islam for 3 years. Every Monday for 3 years against Islam. So, you know, and then it didn't work. And then we had the refugee situation. The Syrians came in 2015, 2016, a big number of refugees. And then that was the rebirth of the AfD, actually, because then they had a real issue at that time. So they could go to the streets and demonstrate against refugees. So they could also mobilize a big number of racists, white supremacists, and also people who are against refugees, so everything. They were able to mobilize at that point so many people who are against immigration, against establishment, you know, everything which US radical politicians say they have it. So there is a lot of like network between the US and the European right-wing movements as well. So it's very important also to understand the pattern of their cooperation. So it's not only the ideology within one country, it's a more globalized network, and they share ideologies. So whatever is a new ideology, then they adapt it. And then we had the global pandemic, Corona pandemic. And then we didn't have any refugees at that time. People were not coming. Only coronaviruses were coming to Germany. So they started their campaign against policies, pandemic policies, and they managed to mobilize again people on the streets because they were complaining that freedom of movement, freedom of speech, and vaccination policies are violating their human rights. So it was not very successful, but they had again a reason to go to the streets. So, you know, like they jump from one issue to the next, to the next, to the next, and their major focus is how do you destabilize the democracy? How do you destabilize this society? So at the end of the day, that you can have an authoritarian system. So it's not only about the issues. Of course, it's a bunch of racists. There's no issue. We have a number of neo-Nazis among them. It's not an issue. But I think their major focus is to destabilize democracies and also create an autocratic state.
Well, regretfully, we've run out of time. So
Yeah.
in closing, I'd like to say a big thank you to Mekonnen, Emily, Davidson College, and to our brilliant students. We are grateful for your presence and leave this conversation very much enlightened.
Thank you so much.
Today's recording will soon be on our YouTube channel at Black German. Please subscribe and turn on the notifications and you'll be notified as new videos are added. Visit our website at bghra.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Eventbrite for details about our upcoming events. We hope that you've enjoyed today's conversation as much as we have. And until next time, we thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you so much for your attention as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. That was really fascinating. And thank you all for your questions, your attention, and your good work. And we'll see each other on Thursday for our final class.